On the 9th of May 2019, in a modest apartment in Mijas, a hillside town on the Costa del Sol, a Bulgarian care worker named Nelly Georgieva let herself in to check on the man she looked after. She found him on the floor. He was 76 years old. There were no visitors that day. There had been almost no visitors for a long time. A neighbor, speaking to the Daily Express that same week, said he had never seen anyone come to the door. The man on the floor had once been one of the highest-paid entertainers in Britain. At his peak, he filled theatres for months at a time, carried his own primetime series on national television, owned a Rolls-Royce, owned racehorses, and reportedly earned between £1 and £2 million a year in an era when the average British salary was a fraction of a single week of his work. His name was Freddie Starr. The post-mortem found heart disease, no mystery, no violence, just a heart that had run out of road in a rented flat in a country he had moved to after everything in his own country had collapsed. The BBC published his obituary the following day. The Guardian's Mark Lawson wrote a piece headlined "A Troubled, Talented Comic Defined by One Famous Headline." Bobby Davro and a generation of British comedians posted tributes within hours, and within days a different story began to circulate. One about who was going to pay to bring him home. Because at the end, Freddie Starr did not have enough money to be buried. To understand how that happened, you have to go back to the beginning, and to a boy who was not born Freddie Starr at all. He was born Frederick Leslie Fowle on the 9th of January 1943 in Huyton, on the eastern edge of Liverpool. Wartime Britain. Rationing. A working-class household in a city that would, within 20 years, become the loudest cultural export on earth. He was there for it. Not as a spectator, as a competitor. In the early to 1960s, Fowle was the lead singer of a Merseybeat rock and roll group called the Midnighters. Same city as the Beatles, same clubs, same circuit. He cut records. He chased the same thing every clubs, same circuit. He cut records. He chased the same thing every young man in Liverpool with a decent voice was chasing in 1963. He did not get it. The Beatles got it. The Midnighters did not. And here is the first thing that matters about Freddie Starr, the thing that explains almost everything that follows. He did not want to be a comedian. He wanted to be a singer. He wanted to be Elvis Presley. Comedy was the door that happened to open, and he went through it because it was open, and he spent the rest of his life pushing against it from the inside. The door opened in 1970. He appeared on Opportunity Knocks, the talent show that functioned as Britain's national lottery for performers. Then came the Royal Variety Performance, the single most powerful platform in British light entertainment, broadcast to an audience measured in tens of millions, with the royal family in the front row. He did impressions. Elvis. Hitler in Wellington boots. He moved like a man who had been fired out of something. He was, by every account of the period, physically extraordinary on a stage, unpredictable, fast, willing to do absolutely anything. Britain had never seen anything quite like it. Willing to do absolutely anything. Britain had never seen anything quite like it, and Britain bought it immediately. Within 4 years, he had a top 10 record. March 1974, a song called It's You reached number 9 in the UK singles chart. The Liverpool kid who lost the Merseybeat race finally got his hit. 9 years too late to be a pop star, at exactly the right moment to be a household name. That same year, 1974, something else began. According to The Guardian's obituary and to Starr's own accounts, it was in 1974 that he started taking Valium. He kept taking it for roughly 20 years. Michael Parkinson, arguably the most respected interviewer in British broadcasting, wrote, that the addiction addled his talent and confused his personality, and that it eroded a virtuosity equaled by only a very few entertainers. Read that again, because it is a remarkable sentence for a man like Parkinson to write. Not he was funny, not he was popular. A virtue to write. Not he was funny, not he was popular. A virtuosity equaled by only a very few entertainers. That is the size of the talent we are talking about. And that is the year the corrosion started, the same year as the hit record. The peak and the rot arrive together and nobody notices, because from the outside all you can see is the peak. The 1970s and 1980s were his. He had his own series, and then another, and then another. He toured constantly. He was a fixture of British Saturday nights for the better part of 2 decades, in the era before streaming, before cable, before choice, when a hit show meant that half the country was watching the same man at the same moment. He bought a Rolls-Royce, he bought racehorses, and on the 9th of April 1994, one of those horses did something that most millionaires never manage. A horse named Minahoma, owned by Freddie Starr, trained by Martin Pipe, ridden by Richard Dunwoody, won the Grand National at Aintree, the most watched horse race in Britain, run 4 miles. Won the Grand National at Aintree, the most watched horse race in Britain, run 4 miles from the city where Starr was born. A working-class boy from Huyton, standing at Aintree, watching his own horse win the National. If you were writing this as fiction, that is where you would end it. Freeze frame, roll credits. It was not the end. It was, in retrospect, the high watermark. And he was already famous for something else entirely, something he had not chosen, something he always denied, and something that would follow him into every obituary written about him 25 years later. The 13th of March, 1986. The Sun ran a front page. 4 words. Freddie Starr ate my hamster. The story, as printed, claimed that Starr had been staying at the Cheshire home of a friend, Vince McCaffrey, in Birchwood, after a show in Manchester, that he had come in late and asked McCaffrey's girlfriend Leah LaSalle for a sandwich, that she refused, and that Starr took her pet hamster, put it between 2 slices of bread, and ate it. The story was placed by the publicist Max Clifford, who in later years spoke openly about his role in it and about how the whole thing came together. Starr denied it for the rest of his life. He said he had never eaten a hamster and pointed out reasonably that he did not even like the taste of hamster-adjacent anything. Decades later, in 2019, people connected to the original story gave interviews about what had and had not actually happened that night. It did not matter. It never mattered, because the headline did something no press agent can reliably engineer. It went into the language. It became shorthand for the entire British tabloid era. It sold out his tour. It made him, for a while, the most talked-about entertainer in the country. And it also became a cage. He was, from March 1986 onward, the Hamster Man, a gifted impressionist and a genuinely dangerous live performer, permanently reduced to a punchline he did not write about an animal he did not eat. Remember that headline. We are going to come back to it. The 1990s were the long plateau. Britain's comedy taste was changing underneath him. The Guardian's obituary would later describe his act as belonging to a style rendered overwhelmingly obsolete by the late 1980s. He still worked. He still filled rooms. He did an audience with the format ITV reserved for national treasures. By the 2000s, he was appearing on reality television, Celebrity Wife Swap, and in 2011, at 68, I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, which he left early on health grounds. That November 2011 appearance was the last time most of Britain saw Freddie Starr on television. A year later, everything changed. In October 2012, ITV broadcast a documentary about Jimmy Savile and the entire geo-architecture of British entertainment from the 1960s to the 1980s came under investigation. The Metropolitan Police launched Operation U-Tree. On the 1st of November 2012, Freddie Starr was arrested as part of that investigation. Here is where precision matters more than drama, so listen carefully. Freddie Starr was arrested and questioned. He was released and rebailed. Listen carefully. Freddie Starr was arrested and questioned. He was released and rebailed repeatedly over a period of roughly 18 months. He denied all allegations. In May 2014, the Crown Prosecution Service announced that he would face no charges, citing insufficient evidence. He was never charged. He was never tried. He was never convicted of anything. That is the documented record, and it is the whole of the documented record. This is not a story about guilt, and it is not a story about vindication. It is a story about what 18 months of being publicly investigated does to a career built entirely on being invited into people's living rooms. The answer is that it ends it. He told the BBC in May 2014 that the inquiry had traumatized him. He said his bookings had evaporated, that he had lost around £1 million in earnings, that the phone had stopped ringing. In a business where employability is reputation and nothing else, the absence of a charge did not restore what the arrest had removed. And then he made a decision. He sued. Freddie Starr proved. And then he made a decision. He sued. Freddie Starr brought a claim for slander and libel against Karen Ward, one of the women whose allegations had circulated, relating to an incident she said had occurred in 1974 behind the scenes of Savile's program Clunk Click when she was 15. Starr denied it categorically. Ward defended the claim on the basis that what she had said was true. The trial ran at the High Court in the summer of 2015. On the 10th of July 2015, Mr. Justice Nichol delivered judgment. The claim was dismissed. The judge found that Ward's account was true and additionally that too much time had passed for the claim to proceed. Starr, who was not in court, lost on every point. He had gone to law to clear his name, and the court had recorded the opposite of what he came for. Then came the bill. Ward had been represented under a conditional fee agreement. Starr was left liable for costs reported at the time as approaching £1 million. The Liverpool Echo, his hometown paper, at the time as approaching £1 million. The Liverpool Echo, his hometown paper, the paper that had covered his rise since the 1960s, ran the words, "Faces financial ruin." He did. Later that year, Freddie Starr was declared bankrupt. Stop and hold the two numbers side by side, because this is the entire story in arithmetic. At his peak, reportedly £1 to £2 million a year, incoming. In 2015, roughly £1 million outgoing in legal costs, with no career left to pay it from. He had won the Grand National with a horse he owned. 21 years later, he could not cover a court bill. And then he left. Freddie Starr emigrated to Spain. He always insisted the move had nothing to do with the money, that he had intended to move to Spain regardless of how the case went. Reporters at the time were skeptical. He did not care what reporters thought. By then, that relationship had been over for years. What is not in dispute is what he moved. Relationship had been over for years. What is not in dispute is what he moved into. Not a villa, not a compound behind gates. A modest flat in Mijas on the Costa del Sol, reported after his death as a one-bedroom apartment. He was, by the accounts of neighbours and of the people paid to look after him, increasingly reclusive and in poor health. He had 6 children. He had married more than once. His last marriage, to Sophie Lear, took place in 2013. in the middle of the yew tree years and had broken down before his death. His relationships with several of his children had, by every available account, broken down long before that. His daughter, Tara Coleman Starr, gave interviews to the British press in 2019 in which she described her father in extraordinarily harsh terms and said publicly that she was unsure whether she would attend his funeral. Sophie Lear gave her own interviews about the marriage, describing it as abusive. None of that is comfortable. All of it is on the record, in their own words, and it belongs in an honest account of how a man ends up alone in a rented flat in another country at 76. His carer, Nelly Georgieva, put it in one sentence that is worth more than any documentary reconstruction. Freddie had bad feelings about back home, she told reporters. He felt the British people had deserted him. She also said she had not spoken to his family in years, so when she found him on the 9th of May 2019, there was an immediate, brutally practical problem. There was a body in Spain, and there was no money, and there was nobody stepping forward. British newspapers reported the possibility openly within days. Freddie Starr was facing a pauper's funeral, a state-funded burial in Spain for a person without means. Typically, an unmarked or communal grave. Think about the sentence that had been on the front page of the biggest-selling newspaper in Britain 33 years earlier. 4 words that everyone in the country could still recite from memory. Now think about the sentence being printed in 2019, that the man in that headline might be buried in an unmarked grave in a country he had run to, because nobody could find the money to bring him back. That was the situation for several weeks. And then a stranger read the story. His name was Michael Fogg. He ran Michael Fogg Family Funeral Directors in Merseyside. He had never met Freddie Starr. He had no connection to the family, no stake in the estate, nothing to gain. He offered to pay to repatriate the body and to fund the funeral. When the Liverpool Echo asked him why, his answer was reported like this: "Anyone that can make a funeral director laugh must be a bloody good comedian, and Freddie Starr could make me laugh." And then, for those asking why I am paying, well, he should be back with the people he loved and back with his family. He shouldn't be buried in foreign land. He should be back with the people he loved and back with his family. He shouldn't be buried in foreign land. He should be brought back to be in his own country. A man who had earned £2 million a year came home to Britain because a funeral director he had never met liked his act. The service was held on the 13th of June 2019 at 1 o'clock in the afternoon at Prescott Parish Church in Merseyside, a few miles from Huyton, where Frederick Leslie Fowle had been born 76 years earlier. It rained. Fans stood outside in it. Mourners wore red roses. There were Elvis tributes, because of course there were. Because the boy from the Midnighters never stopped wanting to be a singer, and everybody in that church knew it. Family attended, including his estranged wife, Sophie Lear, and his daughter, Tara. Comedians and old colleagues came. Reports put the total cost of the funeral at around £20,000. And on the coffin, engraved on one side, were 2 words. Return to sender. An Elvis song, his idol. A joke and a farewell, and, whether anyone intended it or not, the most precise summary of the whole story that anyone managed to write. He had been returned to the sender. Not by his own fortune, which was gone. Not by his own family, which had fractured. By a stranger who thought a man who could make a funeral director laugh deserved to be buried in the country that had watched him. On the other side of the coffin, Liverpool legend. Both of those things were true at once. That was always the problem with Freddie Starr. Everything about him was true at once. So what is the actual lesson here, stripped of sentiment? It is not that fame is hollow. That is a greeting card, not an analysis. It is something narrower and much colder. Freddie Starr built, over roughly 25 years, one of the most successful careers in British entertainment. And what he built was a career, a machine for generatish entertainment. And what he built was a career, a machine for generating income and attention. He did not build the other thing. He did not build the structure that catches a person when the career stops. Every part of his support system was downstream of his employability. The agents, the bookers, the newspapers, the entourage, the invitations, all of it existed because he was bankable. The moment he stopped being bankable in November 2012, all of it went at once, and it went before any court had decided anything. What was left should have been family. And that had been damaged by his own conduct according to the people who lived it over decades, quietly, while the machine was still running and nobody was measuring. So when the money went, and the work went, and the reputation went, there was no second layer underneath. There was a flat in Mijas, a carer who was paid to be there, and a phone that did not ring. He had a Rolls-Royce. He had a horse that won the Grand National. He had a top 10 single and a Royal Variety performance and 4 words on the He had a top 10 single and a Royal Variety performance and 4 words on the front page of The Sun that entered the English language forever. None of those things could get him home. A funeral director he had never met could. And that is the part that should stay with you. Not the collapse, which was public and documented and in some ways predictable, but the last-minute intervention of a total stranger who owed him nothing, because the network that Freddie Starr spent his whole life building disappeared in 18 months. The thing that finally showed up was ordinary human decency from someone with no reason to bother. If nothing else, that is worth knowing about how this actually works. If this story held you, take 1 second to like it and subscribe. It genuinely decides whether films like this reach anyone at all. And if you want to add something, tell me in the comments. Is a man like this best remembered for the talent or for the wreckage? Because with Freddie Starr, the honest answer is probably both, and the record does not let you pick just one. The answer is probably both, and the record does not let you pick just one.